Most people believe knights in full plate armor could barely move. The image is everywhere. Stumbling tin men who needed cranes to mount horses, warriors who drowned in shallow streams because they couldn't stand up, fighters so encumbered they became easy targets the moment they fell. This idea has been repeated in films, textbooks, and casual conversation for generations. It shapes how we imagine medieval warfare entirely. But it was never true. A full suit of plate armor weighed between 45 and 55 pounds, and that weight was distributed across the entire body. A modern firefighter carries more. A soldier in full combat gear today carries significantly more. The difference is that medieval armor was custom-fitted and articulated at every joint to allow full range of motion. Most people believe knights in full plate armor could barely move. The image is everywhere. Stumbling tin men who needed cranes to mount horses, warriors who drowned in shallow streams because they couldn't stand up, fighters so encumbered they became easy targets the moment they fell. This idea has been repeated in films, textbooks, and casual conversation for generations. It shapes how we imagine medieval warfare entirely. But it was never true. A full suit of plate armor weighed between 45 and 55 pounds, and that weight was distributed across the entire body. A modern firefighter carries more. A soldier in full combat gear today carries significantly more. The difference is that medieval armor was custom-fitted and articulated at every joint to allow full range of motion. The myth comes from a misunderstanding of what armor actually was. People imagined rigid metal shells that locked the body into stiffness. In reality, plate armor was a sophisticated system of overlapping steel segments connected by leather straps, rivets, and internal padding. Every joint, shoulder, elbow, wrist, hip, knee, and ankle was designed to flex. Armorers spent years learning how to shape metal so it would move with the body, not against it. A knight could run, jump, climb, roll, and fight on the ground without restriction. Modern recreation tests have proven this repeatedly. Trained fighters in full harness can do cartwheels, somersaults, and mount horses unassisted. The armor moved because it was built by people who understood that immobility meant death. The claim that knights needed cranes to mount horses is one of the most persistent pieces of the myth. It comes from a misreading of historical records. Cranes and lifting devices did exist at tournaments, but they were used for injured or elderly knights or for mounting in full ceremonial armor that was never meant for combat. Battle armor was different. It was lighter, more flexible, and designed for extended physical exertion. Historical manuals from the 15th and 16th centuries show knights mounting horses in full armor by simply placing a foot in the stirrup and swinging up. Some could vault onto a horse from a standing position. The idea that they needed mechanical assistance is a fabrication born from confusing tournament pageantry with battlefield reality. The drowning myth is even stranger. The story goes that knights who fell into water would sink instantly and drown because the armor was too heavy to escape. This appears in retellings of the Battle of Agincourt and other medieval engagements. But plate armor does not make you sink faster than clothing does. Steel is denser than water, but the air trapped inside the armor and the padding beneath it provide buoyancy. A knight in full harness would struggle in deep water, but so would anyone wearing multiple layers of wool, leather, and chainmail. The real danger was exhaustion and cold, not the armor itself. Drowning deaths happened, but they were not unique to armored soldiers. Infantrymen drowned too. The armor was not the variable. The belief that a fallen knight was helpless is closely related. The image is cinematic, a knight on his back, flailing like a turtle, unable to right himself. But this contradicts every historical account of ground fighting. Medieval combat manuals, particularly German and Italian Fechtbücher from the 14th and 15th centuries, include entire sections on armored grappling and ground combat. Knights trained extensively in techniques for fighting while prone, getting up quickly, and using daggers to exploit gaps in an opponent's armor. Falling down was a tactical moment, not a death sentence. Armor was designed with this in mind. The back and chest plates were smoothed to allow rolling. The joints allowed enough movement to stand without assistance. What makes this myth strange is that it erases the actual purpose of armor. Plate armor was not worn despite its weight. It was worn because mobility and protection could coexist. A knight was not choosing between safety and movement. He was choosing both. The entire system was built around sustained combat effectiveness. Battles lasted hours. Tournaments involved repeated charges, dismounted fighting, and prolonged melees. If armor truly restricted movement the way the myth suggests, it would have been abandoned immediately. It wasn't. It dominated European warfare for over 2 centuries because it worked. The men who wore it were professional soldiers who depended on their ability to move, fight, and survive. The myth survives because it confirms a broader narrative about the Middle Ages. We imagine medieval people as less capable, less intelligent, less physically competent than modern humans. The idea of clumsy knights fits neatly into this story. But the opposite is true. Medieval armorers were solving complex engineering problems without modern tools or materials. They were creating articulated joints, compound curves, and weight distribution systems that would not be matched until the 20th century. The armor itself is evidence of sophistication, not primitivism. Museums display these suits as art, but they were functional technology, and the men who wore them were athletes trained from childhood in the specific demands of armored combat. One reason the myth persists is that most people have never handled real armor. Museum pieces are often ceremonial, decorative, or designed for display rather than combat. They are sometimes heavier, stiffer, and less articulated than battlefield armor. Visitors see these static suits behind glass and assume they represent what was worn in war. They don't. Battle armor was workshop-made, fitted to the individual, and continuously adjusted. It was maintained, repaired, and modified based on experience. A knight's relationship with his armor was personal and practical. It was a tool he understood completely. The idea that he would tolerate equipment that made him slow or helpless is nonsense. His life depended on it working. The historical record is unambiguous. Knights in full plate armor were fast, mobile, and lethal. They could fight on horseback and on foot. They could pursue fleeing enemies, scale ladders, and engage in prolonged melee without collapsing from exhaustion. The armor enhanced their capability, it did not diminish it. But the myth remains embedded in popular imagination. People still picture medieval warriors as lumbering and vulnerable, trapped inside their own protection. That image was never real. It was a misunderstanding that became a story, and the story became history. Most people still believe it. Comment and subscribe.